Wow, we're back. Hi
back.
there, Task Force.
Hey there.
FJ Live.
Farmer Jones, yeah.
No,
and all
it's
the
Mr.
campers.
Johnson.
Hey
Don't get people confused. All right, that was pretty amazing. So we left off, and we broke the line, and we came back because my little app decided to get stupid. So we're back. And we were just talking, we left off about talking about the difference on DID, right, which is dissociative identity disorder, which is the new name of multi-personality disorder, right? Now realize this is a separate episode, so I just did that so people will kind of bring it up to speed. So I think the last question was, as a therapist, can you tell the difference when treating somebody or diagnosing them between something that happened like as a natural thing versus somebody that has been programmed via an MK Ultra type abuse? And you're on.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and you said yes last time, so go ahead.
Yes, you can.
Okay,
so,
great. Next question. No, sorry, go ahead.
Good. Yeah. So I think I was discussing with you, like, people are probably wondering how would this person, know about all this kind of Nazi stuff, right? I mean, you can read a lot of books and stuff, but how would you know and make connections with the CIA and with the Freud and the labs and all this stuff? How would I know this? Because a lot of it's not in places where you could find it.
Well, yeah, but wait, we want to do that next, but don't you want to do the DID thing first?
Yeah.
So where you talk about the difference between a programmed victim versus just a natural trauma victim, like a guy in battle in the war versus, a kid who's been abducted and abused and now has been created that, right? So let's hit that first, and then we'll ask the important question is, how do you know so much about the Nazis? So, I mean, you want to hit the Nazis first, or you want to hit DID first?
No, I'll touch on DID first. There's some things I have to be careful about, but I'll touch on
All right, you know what? We could end this right here, and I'll just start it over. Let's do it that way. You want to do that? Are you good with that? Here, I'll stop. All right, campers, we're back. Task Force, say hey.
Hey. How's it going?
There you go. All right, so we left off, just to recap for the campers, we were talking about DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which has been renamed instead of multi-personality disorder. And the question that I had asked is, can you tell as a therapist, as an analyst, or what do we call that, where you diagnose them, the difference between somebody who may have been gotten this from shell shock in battle or whatnot versus somebody who has been victimized and MK Ultra'd? And you had said yes. So can you discuss that in a little more depth?
Well, first of all, someone who has been shell-shocked in battle, like you're talking, that would be considered PTSD, right? They don't develop DID. So DID is something that is developed in from childhood trauma. So there's some differences. So someone who is taken and programmed, it's very severe, right? So you're going to see severe personality changes, severe switches to other personas per se, and then someone with and you can still see this with someone with DID that was just simply severely abused as a child by their relative or or some cult or something that wasn't necessarily under governmental control, right?
Right, so, and it wasn't done with the intention of creating the disorder. It was just abuse that resulted in the disorder. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. So there's lots of similarities in presentations of those types of people. The difference is kind of who did it and why it was done, right? What was the intention behind it? And so what often happens is people that are in a program per se, where the government was involved in some way in programming them, they rarely get to therapists because they're controlled, right? They're monitored.
Well, wait. You said they rarely get the therapist, meaning they rarely get treatment, or the therapists or the people actually doing this to them, or both?
Both. but the people that are in the program, they're not going to be really allowed to go to like random therapists. They'll be controlled to prevent that. So what actually happens is, if they, for some reason, if they go into therapy or they're brought into therapist settings, they will be brought into a CIA therapist or CIA doctor, right? Because the CIA wants to control that information, right? So, so they are ushered into, I'll call them treatment programs for now.
Okay.
That are really monitored and controlled by either the CIA or CIA contractors to keep the story.
So it's not a treatment program. It's really not.
No,
it's a fake treatment program. It's to maintain the nonsense. It's like, oh, yeah, we're here to help you, and they're really not.
Right.
Is that,
it's like we're here to make sure your story doesn't get out. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
lovely.
Right. So that's kind of how that works. And so sometimes, though, occasionally you'll get somebody that's been, they're part of a program, or maybe they got out of it in some way. There's different ways, and they get into a therapist situation where most therapists don't have any understanding of this. In fact, I could talk to psychologists and tell them these things, and it blows their minds unless they've been involved in the government. They don't have an understanding of this. They don't even know it exists. So when they get kids, and then you've got this whole separate thing, like groups, like the false memory syndrome group, right? And they're the group that comes around and says, oh, therapists are implanting some of these memories in children, right? That's that went on for a long time with the satanic panic after the McPherson nursery school thing they had. Right. Well, all the members of the false memory syndrome committee that basically go into court and testify that children are being implanted with memories, they are all CIA agents.
Exactly. They're the disinformation agents.
Right.
To cover
They're
it
part
up.
of the government that have all these credentials that come in to basically squash the victim's true story.
I got it. So they're expert witnesses that come in working for the other side, pretending they're the good guys, and saying, oh, no, this never happened. The therapist who's saying that the kid experienced this is really that they planted these thoughts in the kid's head, and it's bullshit. Right. Wow.
And then you have a lot of the judges.
So it's basically a massive cover-up. Just quash it. Wow.
And a lot of the judges are also controlled in this, right? So they are part of the quashing. So
like we talked about last time. Exactly.
Right. So I'm not saying that that it has never happened that a therapist who is either abusive or is trained wrong or something doesn't take a young child and not implant but expand upon some incident, right? Make it worse. I'm not saying that never happens. I'm not it's carte blanche, but I'm saying that they have intentional programs to prevent these stories from coming forward. Now, one thing that your campers can look up that can really help them is there was a study done and a brilliant I don't want to say thesis, but a paper written by a guy, the last name of Hammonds, Dr. Hammonds, Hammonds, out of UCLA, and he wrote.
Is that a double M? Double M.
Double M. Yeah.
Okay.
He wrote. I think it's like C-O Hammonds or something. It's two initials, but it's Dr. Hammonds. I can actually get a link for you and pass it along to you, and they can read it. But he wrote and did a whole presentation on the MK Ultra in the 90s, early 90s, the MK Ultra and the use of satanic ritual abuse in the process, and how he was finding and treating all these kids who were reporting these same behavior, same things happening to them over and over again. And most of these kids were kids of military, NASA, high-level government officials, right?
Interesting. Wow.
Right, because a lot of these kids are placed into these programs by their parents. It's a generational thing within the government. So he reported on that. Well, he was, annihilated. His career was ruined, right? But it is a brilliant presentation if you want to read something, and I'll send the link to you if you can. So
that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be excellent.
Yeah.
So after he publishes this, what happens? They accuse him of whatever.
Yeah, they just ruined his career.
We'll say he wasn't peer reviewed well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Except that he had been a formidable psychiatrist before then. He had an outstanding career. He just made the decision that enough was enough, right? So he does this presentation where he basically outs all this, and then everybody shut down after that. I don't know if he's still alive. I'm sure he had many death threats. I'm sure really bad.
Well, let me stop you and back you up here because you and I know a lot of this stuff. Let's bring people up to speed. First of all, what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist? Right. Okay. My understanding, psychiatrist is basically an MD. He's a pill pusher, or he can prescribe drugs and meds, antidepressants, etc. Psychologist is more along the lines of talk therapy and get into the inner emotional stuff. Yeah. Right? But no drugs allowed. They don't do drugs.
Right. So a psychiatrist is trained. So a psychiatrist is a full medical doctor, and then they go through an additional training that deals specifically with like brain chemicals, right, or brain disease. And they look at someone with a mental health problem from a disease perspective, right?
Physiological that they could treat with drugs
in the brain,
or surgery.
We've got to fix it through some way, medically or whatever. A psychologist says it's some psychologists, there's a mixture that there is some brain disease, and we need to help someone get coping skills to deal with this brain disease. And then psychologists like me, I wasn't a psychologist, I was a clinical therapist, but we kind of lean on a lot of these brain diseases or mental health problems are based in unresolved trauma. So we try to get inside and get the trauma out in various techniques and heal.
Emotionally. Yeah, exactly. And it's not like you could reach in, but you can't reach in with pliers or tweezers and remove it the way the MDs want to do. They want to treat it with drugs or surgery. They're saying it's physiological. You're saying it's psychological.
Right. And I'm not denying that there's a physiological component. But you have to understand that there's a connection between the physiological and the soul, I would say, right, or the internal self. So when the internal self is, if you can picture, now some people might want to say, well, we don't have a soul, but let's just picture there's a soul inside you, right? If the soul has an injury, right, if it's injured in some way, the parasympathetic nervous system is injured, for instance, oftentimes in trauma. So the chemicals such as norepinephrine or dopamine, things like that make us feel stable and well and functional will get distorted because of that injury inside, right? That's what happens in PTSD. So the endorphins will rush too high. The cortisol will be imbalanced. And so psychiatrists will look at that and say, okay, we need to give you medicine to fix that. Right, imbalance. Psychologists or trauma therapists will say, yes, that might be needed for some short period of time, but we need to work on the pain that's inside of the soul injury and heal that, and then the brain will balance out. Does that make sense?
Yes, I like that.
Okay, right.
Good. Okay, so that was one question, the difference between psychiatry and psychology. And now the other thing was when you were talking about these kids, and that was amazing with this guy Hammond's article. So he basically found a bunch of these, we'll call them the programmed victims, and basically, and there was a satanic component to it.
Yeah.
And he outed it, right, as you said. And then, of course, I don't know which group went after him, but he was basically shut down and discredited and trashed.
Right.
But the question is, how did those kids, those victims who were probably not kids anymore, right? What were the people that went to him? Were they children? Were they teenagers? Were they young adults? Were they, full-grown adults, middle-aged? What?
I believe all ages, and I don't know his story exactly, but so places like, I don't want to call different hospitals.
Well, all right. Well, wait. Without even going there, that's not the question. But the question that I had is, how did these kids get to him, or these, we'll call them victims, get to him? Because you had just said earlier that these, what do we want to call these people? They are clearly victims. But they're the programmed people, right? They've been programmed. They've been MK Ultra'd. And that they are handled and they're controlled and they're kept in de-isolation mode and not allowed to go see a regular therapy because they don't get out. So how did these people get to Hammond? You see what I'm saying? Or was he an inside guy who decided he saw too much crap and he said, that's it, I'm blowing the lid off this?
That's exactly right. He said enough's enough. And kind of blew it up and said, not only is this happening,
and then they blew him up and said,
and
wow,
like,
that would be a great link.
I'll provide that link because it's a great paper to really understand it. So
all right, and then the other question in that same line is, how do other people get out? People who are whatever version they're doing, how do they get out where they could eventually stagger to a real therapist or whatnot?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work as in your experience?
In my experience, rarely do they get out through therapy like that, typical therapy.
No, but I mean, how do they get out of the program itself in order to even be able to reach out to a therapist?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
The people that I know, right? So I know a lot of young adults who were programmed, are involved in these kind of things, and for reasons that are individual or whatever, they've somehow escaped their programmers, and a lot of times that is because they've separated from their biological families, things like that, and that doesn't mean that they're out in terms of they're not still targeted, but it means they're not being handled, right? So they're handlers. So once you become a certain age, like in your 30s or 40s, if you're not, an assassin, or you're not, you're kind of too old to be kind of the slave, So you're just basically handled. They just want you to be quiet if you're still alive and functional.
I see. Okay. So they basically let you go, but tell you to shut up.
We'll tell you to shut up. But their brains, some of them, their brains come together and they say, screw this, I want to fight, right? I mean, the people are real. The resilience of people is amazing. And so what I have done, or what I try to do, is because I understood this, and I would have some people that I saw that were part of programming at some point, I knew what I was looking at, right? So I also knew that if I sent them to a psychiatrist or somebody like that, the odds are they were going to be sent into some treatment program where they would be quieted down, right? So I would work with these people.
Or they'd be medicated, and that's the answer. Right? You're suffering from anxiety, take some Prozac or Xanax. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That kind of stuff isn't really a problem. I'm talking about medicated with like Thorazine, things like that, like heavy duty, or even having.
I laugh at that. I used to have a friend when I was like younger. We always used to kid around and say, "Oh yeah, before you know it, you'll be doing the Thorazine."
Yeah. Right, it's really heavy duty stuff, and then that screws up your system.
Drooling on yourself, walking around like what's that in the movie? What's his name? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? The Thorazine Shuffle. There you go. Right.
So, and when I say that, I don't want to. If people are listen to this and they're on Thorazine or something like that, I don't want them to feel like, that there's something wrong with it. It's not. This is how the world works and treats people, right? So if you're on medication because you've suffered from some sort of trauma, I don't want people to feel bad about that when I'm talking about this stuff. or for them to just jump off their medication, because that's not the answer either. I'm trying to help people understand it. So don't blame yourself or anything like that. Okay?
No, I'm glad you said that. That's very, very helpful and very, very responsible. That's very responsible of you. Thank you. Good.
So don't just like go off and do your own thing. Right. I mean, I'm trying to just give a greater explanation, but don't do anything drastic at all.
Right. What you're saying is that those meds can be abused also to keep other people quiet, but they're also very valuable when they're properly prescribed and needed.
Right. And there are times in somebody's life where the trauma is so severe that medications and stuff are desperately needed just to save that person for that period of time. So, you have to be really careful about. I don't pass judgment on that. I just try to simply give education to people to help them try to get out of and heal, and tell them that there is hope. I really, that's the message I want to give, is there is hope for healing from this kind of stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, so bringing this back, though, so when these people would get out, or they were released, or they get old enough and they can't be controlled as easily, right? They can't be triggered or I guess triggered is the word, right, to switch them into mode, right? Then they're no longer used to the agency, right? They can't be good undercover, secret, dual personality type agents.
Yeah, and
they're cut loose and told to be quiet. Right, and they're just told to be quiet. And those are the people that either go into isolation or they kind of reintegrate and get mad and want to fight back.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I was saying in the last episode, that you have an army of these people that are physiologically, their brains, they're integrating this emotionally, and they're becoming aware of it and are pissed off, and they want to come forward. Right. I'm trying to think of what that woman, what's her name, O'Brien? The woman who was like the sex slave, is that her name?
Yeah, Kathy O'Brien is a good example of that. Yeah.
Right.
A real fighter.
Okay. Right.
Right. So but you have to understand, when you look at Kathy O'Brien and you see her, now she's a real fighter, but that doesn't mean that she can't be triggered and that she's not suffering, right? Because that kind of trauma is, it's like, if you have some massive, if you have your arm cut off in an injury, you might stop feeling the pain and you might get a prosthetic, but ultimately your arm's still cut off, right? So you have to understand that there's a lot of permanent damage, but it doesn't mean that there's not also incredible healing. There's a balance there. So, I'm trying to help.
And it's a process. It's a process. It's not an on-off switch.
Yeah, and you need a lot of support and a lot of you have to have a tremendous amount of compassion when working and helping these people, because their pain is so horrible.
Right, and you had indicated again in one of our earlier conversations, not on tape, that I just lost my thought. I'm getting over-caffeinated here. I didn't want to fall asleep. Okay. About how the traditional psychology or psychiatry field has really no clue on how to deal with this, both the PTSD and certainly not the DID. What's your read on that? Yeah,
the way that it's been treated, for years is just the treatment models are it's based on that the person's brain is somehow missing something, or
injured,
right?
Yeah.
Right, and so they actually don't say it injured; they consider it ill, right? Sickness, and so it's treated in that model. And if you treat it as trauma, there's much more hope for some sort of recovery. That doesn't mean that everybody recovers completely or that you're not scarred or anything, but there's much more hope for a meaningful life and compassionate life and a connecting life with humanity and, that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay.
So both in
all right, good. And then, I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
I said both in DID and PTSD and many, many other trauma-related conditions. So,
and then we have the other one, which is CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress. And I know we've talked about that, and in line with the borderline personality disorder, that a lot of times that's misdiagnosed because somebody who has been abused is suffering from CPTSD, and those symptoms could be very similar to borderline personality disorder, and they are misdiagnosed.
Very, very frequently.
Actually, right. So you're not a borderline. You're actually suffering from complex post-traumatic stress, and they're saying, oh, no, you have a personality disorder, when all you're doing is reacting in a PTSD manner.
You're just,
and that's what we were saying, is that the traditional models don't even see that.
Right.
That's horrible. What a joke.
Complex PTSD is simply, it's repeated trauma over time, constantly. So the resulting, of course, of that is like a lot of these very wild swings in someone's behavior, and they say, oh my God, it's personality disorder. Well, you're actually just dealing with such trauma, such swings of overreaction to trying to be quiet and small and get away from it, and hide from the pain. It's all that stuff, and people look at that from the outside and they go, oh, this person has got a personality disorder. They're just whacked. And really, it's not the case. Yeah. Yeah,
it's not the disorder. It's something triggering the PTSD.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right.
All right. Well, this is excellent. But let's jump into some more of the meat here, because that's kind of like all foundational stuff, which is all very important. But I became aware of that CPTSD and studying, the narcissism and the borderlines.
Yeah.
And that's where they made the point. And that if you are on an extended abuse period dealing with a narcissistic disorder, and they are abusing you and jerking you left, right, and center and turning everything around, it's like, listen, I'm cold. Why don't you set yourself on fire? And that's the kind of mentality you're dealing with. An idiot like that. It's like, oh, well, and that goes on forever, months, days, years, right? That
all of a child's life,
and it becomes a PTSD. It becomes a complex PTSD.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I don't even know from a child side. It could also be you get stuck into a relationship. People get married into that. And they're in long-term relationships with these lunatics. And they end up suffering from the CPTSD. And it's a defense mechanism to survive the lunacy. So that can also be treated, but they have to become aware. And they could be accused of being a borderline. Right? Yeah. They become like their abuser in a certain sense, but it's like a defensive mechanism. So it's a very complicated thing, but it's very important to understand the difference. All right, so you were telling me in the last conversation we were talking about Freud and his depravity, and that kind of developed into the MK Ultra. And what we were saying is, that he has a school or a lab. You want to tell us about that? This depravity, where is it, in the U.S. or is it in England or is it in Germany or where?
It's in England. And I'm not going to name the name of it on tape right now because it's kind of put the target on you really bad. But it is still operating. And obviously he's dead, but it's still, his philosophy and stuff is still operating. And out of that place comes all the kind of, at one time I think there was 200 satellite kind of campuses under in black budgets under color of law, right?
And so it's interesting. And those are here in the U.S. or they're
in the U.S. and Canada, all over, but in the U.S. and Canada mostly.
Yeah, and you were saying that it's a lab, and I said, is it a lab or is it a school, or can you discuss that, or you just leave that private?
It's a everything. It's a on the in. I've never been on the inside. I know people that have, but on the very inside is, I from what I know is, like hell on earth. It's a lab where all these horrible things are done, and on the outside there's all these kind of cover of social engineering and social sciences and
social welfare.
They even have therapy. They have a bunch of therapists there, ton of them, and a lot of the kind of kids that need treatment and stuff like that are sent to this place, but oftentimes it's just reprogramming,
Right, and the people that go into this lab, are they walking in off of the street saying, hey, I need therapy, or are they being abducted and kidnapped and thrown in there?
Well, I'm not going to say. I would say they're not walking in voluntarily. No.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's jump into the thing you started before, which was on the whole Nazi thing, which is interesting. I'm trying to see how long we've been going here. Let me press my little app, this stupid app, then shift it again. Oh man, I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna host again. Let's see what happens. I can't tell if it worked. Yeah, okay. So I had to log in, but I didn't have to log in, so I'm here.
Okay.
Do I sound normal, or I'm looking in the group. There's now 3 people. I'm in there twice, and you're in there once. Hopefully, we're not having a double. Wonderful. But I can address the recording thing, and I want to see how long this stupid thing has been running. I can't tell. Wonderful. Oh, man. All right. That's that. Well, sorry about that. Well, should we stop this recording and start another one on the Nazis, or you want to do the Nazis right now?
No, you know what? I'll give a quick blurb on the Nazis so that when people want to listen to the next thing, they'll know what I'm going to go into.
Okay, excellent idea. Perfect. Okay.
So
for our coming attractions, campers.
Yeah, coming attractions. So a lot of people probably would want to ask the question, well, how in the hell do you know a lot about Nazis, right? How do you know?
And let me just stop you. What you had said in the last episode was amazing. Yeah. You said you had Stalin, Hitler, and Freud. And there's somebody else in that group?
Mussolini.
And Mussolini. So all 4 of these geniuses were in the same group. And what did you say? They were in Vienna?
They were in Vienna, Vienna, France. They weren't.
Not Vienna, Austria? Is there a Vienna, France?
Vienna, France, right. They didn't hang out I don't know. I wasn't there in the 1900s, but they weren't in a group all together huddling. They had some contact, and then there was some secret societies. I'll say that name at some point. It's a name most people will have no clue about.
It's not the Illuminati?
No, but that is part of it. But it is one of the top secret societies, kind of Luciferian secret societies in the world, and Hitler was, in that.
Okay, so they were part of that. So these 4 guys were. So did they put them all in the same room, or they just happened to be in the same town, and they would
They just happened to be in the same town, and then I know a lot more about what happened to Hitler specifically. And
right, all right. So, and how did you know so much about the Nazis? That's what you were going to tell us.
Okay, yeah. So I'll give a blur about that.
I don't know. I'm thinking if people hung in this long, they don't want to get cut off now. They had to hear about all this psychology bullshit, and the MD and the PhD.
Yeah.
And the PhD is higher and deeper. Anyway, now let's run this. This is good stuff. We'll do a short version. If you want to do long, we'll put this out, and we'll see what the comments are. And then if they want you to run the super juice, then we'll do super juice next. How's that sound?
Sure.
Good?
Yeah.
All right.
So quickly, how do I know this stuff, right?
Right.
So, obviously some of it's history and schooling and all that kind of stuff and being very interested in it. But secondly, the most profound part of it is that in 2009, I won't go into details of how I met this person, but I met a woman who was a world-famous artist in the United States, and she was approaching 80, so she was 79, and she was the child of one of Hitler's top kind of inner circle commandants. And she, her father.
So way back then in Nazi Germany.
1938. Right. So she was 8 years old in 1938 when Hitler was first really coming into power, when he did his speech in Munich and stuff. And so the way they indoctrinated the people back then was they took, at the time, theaters were, the big movie screens were new, right? It was a new thing.
Yeah.
And her father owned all the theaters in Germany, throughout Berlin and Munich and everywhere. They were kind of royalty, per se, in Germany. Very, very wealthy. Hitler.
Wait. Who was royalty? Her family?
This woman's father owned all the theaters, so their family did. So she lived in a theater, but it was almost like a castle, right? Mansion.
Right.
And
which must be pretty cool when you're 8 years old and you got the giant screen when it's a new thing.
Right, and all the like old movies and the subtitles, all that stuff, you know. So I met her at 79, when she was 79 years old in 2009, and Hitler had set up some of his bases inside these theaters because they were using the theaters to indoctrinate the soldiers and children. They would bring them in and sit them in the theaters and show them movies about the Jewish people or all kinds of indoctrination stuff. And she witnessed as a little girl, right?
Right.
And she also witnessed she was in the house when Hitler and Himmler, all these monsters that we've heard of, and her father and stuff hung out and smoked cigars and discussed war plans and all kinds of stuff. She was also horribly abused by these people, but she also was very indoctrinated, and she even remembers and described to me being 8 years old and putting on at the time, her prettiest dress to go meet Hitler and sign up for the Brown Army, the brown shirts. The Hitler Youth was a big deal. And so Hitler was revered. And so her life from age 8 to 17 involved the rise of Hitler to power, the taking of the Jewish people, and she had Jewish children friends prior to this, so she didn't understand a lot of it, but she became indoctrinated, and she lived out World War II, and so as the Americans began bombing Germany and Normandy and all that stuff, her theater was bombed, and her father was, she believes, taken through Operation Paperclip, but he disappeared, and she was 17 by the time the Americans were entering Munich, where she was in this theater, trying to take care of a younger sibling. And so anyway, I don't want to go through her whole story because it's remarkable and it should be a movie, but I met her at 79, and the Americans had saved her life, and she became, unindoctrinated, or learned the truth through the Americans who protected her and took her kind of on their journey as they began to open up the concentration camps. And she saw with her own eyes what was really happening, right? At 17, if you can imagine. So she escaped to America. She became a very famous, world-famous artist where she would paint. She has these huge abstract paintings, but the paintings were all about her trying to paint out her pain, right? So you can see it in her paintings. And she was trying to get that out of her system. Carl Jung was actually a friend of hers. She became friends with him. So she knew all these stories and knew the names of all these people. She was as bright as a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old at age 79. Her brain was incredible, right?
Right,
but
she was right there.
She was elderly, right? And so for reasons I don't fully grasp, she trusted, of course, no one, never trusted anyone with her story because she had been a Nazi child, and she felt like she had blood on her hands, even though she wasn't involved. Her parents were involved in these horrible things, and she witnessed them. So when she escaped to America, she changed her identity and just kept all the secrets and the trauma, and I can't explain to you the trauma right now. It's so horrific. She kept it deep inside her heart, right? So when I met her at 79, she had broken her arm, and then she broke her back, and then so she was kind of dying, right? Yeah. And you could feel the presence of the pain, the suffering. It emitted from her, okay? And she, for reasons I don't understand, trusted me and told me all of these stories, and gave me documents, manuscripts, pictures of her and Hitler. Truth about
so it's
secrets.
Proof, to show you, look, I'm not making this shit up. This is real.
She was brought into she was brought into a hospital at one point where MK Ultra was being done. She watched it. She saw, she's an eyewitness to all of it. and she had names of American politicians that she saw there, who was who, what the plan was after the Third Reich fell, where they went through Argentina and South America, she knew it all. So
wow, so she gave you the whole blueprint.
She gave me the whole thing for a year, 4 hours a week for a year. I sat with her and just listened. And then at age 80 in 2010, she had suffered a massive back injury, and she had never, at that point, she had never cried or anything when she told me these stories. It was much kind of like just a dialogue. So I was very compassionate, and I was trying to help her understand that she didn't have blood on her hands, right? That was kind of her, you could feel that in her heart, that she was just a child who had experienced this. And so she was working it out, right? It was kind of therapy. Even though I wasn't her therapist, it was kind of me helping bring that pain out and saying, "This, you were just hurt, right? You did these things because you were hurt." So at 80, she winds up having this very bad back injury and was dying, and she was decrepit and ashamed and all this stuff. And she, at one point, as she was dying, she started to cry, and I put my arms on her, and she was very untouchable to that moment. And she fell into my arms at 80, and I held her for 36 hours, 3 days straight. And she cried for 3 days straight, sobbed, sobbing out the pain in her heart. I can't explain what it was like. It was so incredible to be.
Wow, this is a tremendous release of all of the guilt and shame. And
all of it.
Wow.
And to be the person that was entrusted to hold that precious life, that's what I felt like, was an honor to me. Very, very moving to me. So anyway, within a month, she had a massive stroke and died on my birthday in 2010. And the last words that she spoke were, she sang happy birthday to me and closed her eyes and passed away. And she taught me things about life and history and love and compassion and pain and trauma and history of the world that, for reasons I don't know, she gave it to me. And she told me before she died, she said, "I give you my story and my history." And I said, "I'll never tell another soul because it was precious," right? It was, she gave me her trust. And she looked at me and said, "There will be a time in your life, a time will come when this story is important to tell, for reasons not about you or me, but bigger reasons." I didn't understand it at the time. Why she would say this. Now I understand it, and now is the time. So that's part of why I'm bringing this forward, and because I have this knowledge, and that's the gap. So at some point I can go into more details of that, but that's
we'll do that on another chat. This is amazing. So that's where you have all of the inside information.
That's where I have it,
and the Operation Paperclip and the plans. And perhaps we are looking towards the Fourth Reich trying to rise in America.
Yes, I have that information, yes.
That's not good. It's good to have that information.
To be continued. We're trying to stop it,
Yeah, wow. All right, and on that note, campers, I think we're going to let Task Force jump. We don't want to burn too much clock. How are we doing for our, if we want to be obnoxious, we could put these out as a weekly series. But I think we want to give them the data and let them work with it.
No, I
All
think
right,
they
well,
need
listen,
data.
we'll do some comments. And when I'll put this up is I'll do a video, and I'll put the link in and ask for the comments, and we'll see. So in case I forget to do the video, campers, leave the comments and see what you want to hear about next. All right, Task Force. In that case, I'm going to stop the recording. Hang on. Let me hit stop because I'm getting better at working the app. How exciting. Excellent. Maybe I'll try video next time so we can watch me. This way we'll see me listening to you. How exciting.
That's thrilling,
Yeah. All right. We'll say bye for now, campers.
Okay.
And we'll
Bye,
see you
campers.
later. All right.